Yeah, sir. So it goes like, hello people, hello people, hello people, hello people. Today we're talking about power. These days, power has almost become a cliched word. We use power to talk about almost everything. We talk about power in friendships, we talk about power dynamics in relationships, we talk about power in a team. Power is everywhere. Have you ever questioned if you are missing the exercise of power at a much larger scale? Is there an exercise of power that we have not recognized but happens every day in our schools, in factories, or in our offices that we so desperately love to lose our sense of self, and we miniature corporate machines that wiggle at the tiniest bit of movement of our evaluation by an algorithm? Thomas Hobbes in 1651, in his book Leviathan, describes what he calls the state of nature. State of nature is the hypothetical state of people if there are no governments or society. In this state of nature, people do not have a conception of right or wrong, and therefore everything that they do is for self-preservation, and as a result, expectedly, their life was short, brutish, solitary, poor, and nasty. Now, Hobbes says that this state of war, or the state of nature, is countered by a social contract in between a sovereign, who is either the ruler or decision of majority, with the individuals who were to be ruled. And because of this social contract, individuals live their state of nature and enter civil society. When they enter civil society, they trade their liberty for security. So these individuals consent to surrender some of their rights and submit to authority in exchange for protection of their other rights and the maintenance of social order. Now, in a Hobbesian view, this social bond that is maintained by the sovereign comes precisely from the love of the self and self-interest, and not from the love of the fellow members of the community. Hobbes thought that power would then be exercised from the singular position of sovereignty, what he called the Leviathan, a mythological sea monster. Now, enter Foucault in 1975 with his book Discipline and Punish. While Foucault agreed that there was this power dynamics where the sovereign was exerting power over the individuals it was ruling, he didn't agree that it was the only singular power acting on people. For Foucault, the power, the sovereign power that had been running for 200 years in the past, was encountering new forms of power. And one of these new forms of powers is what he calls disciplinary power. To explain what it is, he gives an example of prisons. Before the 18th century, criminals were punished using public executions and corporal punishments. A large audience was expected while the criminal was heartlessly punished. The punishment glorified the power the sovereign or the ruler had over anybody who dared to question the authority of the sovereign or the rules made by the sovereign. And it calls for reforms. Punishing moved towards punishing not using public executions, but using control over a body and its movement, called discipline. Discipline. Prisons then became this system of mass control of body and its movement. While the sovereign power is exercised through punishment and reward, disciplinary power is exercised through surveillance and knowledge. Now, this idea can also be extended from prisons to our schools, to our factories, or our workplaces. Disciplinary power has three elements: hierarchical observation, normalizing judgment, and examination. Hierarchical observation is coerced using constant surveillance. To explain what hierarchical observation is, Foucault gives an example of the panopticon thought out by English philosopher Jeremy Bentham. A panopticon is a building where the watchman outside can see the prisoners inside the building, but the prisoners inside cannot see outside the building. So they always have to assume that the watchman is always watching them, even when the watchman is not there. Now, this form of hierarchical observation is being used more and more today, with CCTVs acting as modern panopticons in schools and offices. The second element is called normalizing judgment. This involves creating an idea of what is normal and creating ranks based on who acts in a normal sense and who does not. In schools, for example, you're expected to act in a normal way, in a certain sense. For example, being obedient of school rules is considered normal, and any deviance leads you to getting punished, not essentially directly harm to your body, but to your rank. You lose house points, you lose practical marks, or basically you're not awarded the rewards that being normal would have awarded you. There's this idea of what is normal is good, and what is not normal is bad, and ought to be corrected. The third element is examination, and I think everybody here is familiar with what examination means. Examination unites hierarchical observation and normalizing judgment to create docile subjects who can be controlled and upon whom power can be exercised. We practice discipline in disciplinary society based on our knowledge of how to fit into the society. Disciplinary society tells people how to act by asking them to adjust to what is normal. Personally, and I might be wrong, and if I am, please let me know in the comment box, I feel like the three elements of disciplinary power are very apparent in all the religions too. There's hierarchical observation. We have this invisible and omniscient God that is always watching us in this panopticon universe. We're normalizing judgment in the sense that we have this expected idea of what a good follower of a God is. And we also have examination in the sense that we're always being tested by God. This form of power exercise can be seen integrated deeply and subtly into parts of our life that we never even thought about. An important question people might ask is, how does Foucault evaluate power? Is discipline and power a wrong thing? From my reading of Foucault, I feel like he is just evaluating power because it is not so important a question than understanding how the power is exerted. Most of the time when we're in a society, we do not know how power is being exercised. And I think Foucault helped us to understand how there could be more forms of power than just the sovereign power that Hobbesian philosophy talked about. So I feel like Foucault is talking about power in more of a descriptive than a normative sense. Then comes Deleuze in 1992, who argues that Foucault's disciplinary society that ran from 18th century to end of 20th century is now moving to a new form of society, to what he called societies of control. In the societies of control, corporations have replaced factories. Of course, the factory was already familiar with the system of bonuses, but the corporation works more deeply to impose a modulation of its salary in states of perpetual meta-stability that operates the challenges, contests, and highly comic group sessions. Deleuze says that corporations divide people. They focus on individuals, and by making everything hyper-individualistic, they make competition the core of the structure. They pit individuals against each other, and by making competition the motivation for work, and excellent motivation for work, they exercise power. In that sense, societies of control leverages power in a more elaborate sense than earlier societies. Furthermore, Deleuze says that in societies of control, we're represented by numbers, we are codified, and therefore we become divisuals from individuals. We're not a single entity anymore, we are the code that represents us. For me, this is reminiscent of how TikTok and Insta algorithm feed information to us, not as individuals, but to the code representation of us as individuals. This whole transformation from societies of the sovereign to the societies of control can be aptly summarized by this comment I found in one of the videos about Deleuze. This sounds roughly like society has been transitioning from a static social role to a dynamic social contract. In the former, any deviation from one's externally defined role is punished. In the latter, one builds his or her own personal prison through specific contracts or privileges. For me, it is terrifyingly scary to think that we're building our own prisons by committing ourselves to the corporate world of power and control. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching, and tune in for more epistemic spaghetti.